The exact moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez realized she had walked into an ambush disguised as a town hall wasn't when the cameras turned on, or even when the audience first applauded. It was when Kash Patel smiled. It was not the polite, practiced smile that politicians deploy like riot shields to deflect awkward questions. It was the smile of a federal prosecutor who has just reviewed the surveillance footage that destroys a defendant's alibi. It was the smile of a man who knows the end of the movie because he wrote the script. She had arrived at the News Nation America Speaks town hall in Washington, D.C., with the breeziness of someone who believed she was untouchable. For 3 years, AOC had surfed a wave of adoring media coverage. She was the queen of the clapback, the master of the viral moment, a politician who had convinced millions of social media followers that 280 characters constituted a policy platform. She had prepared for this night the way she prepared for everything, by curating her aesthetic and memorizing her grievances. She wore a sharp designer blazer over a t-shirt with a slogan adjacent to "Tax the Rich," a carefully calculated outfit designed to look rebellious yet expensive. She had her talking points about billionaire bootlickers and late-stage capitalism loaded in the chamber, ready to fire. Kash Patel had arrived with something different. He didn't bring slogans. He brought a leather portfolio, an iPad Pro, and 15 years of experience as a national security official and federal prosecutor. He had spent a career dismantling the arguments of people who thought they were the smartest person in the room. He sat in his chair, checking the connection on his iPad, looking less like a debater and more like a forensic accountant preparing for an audit. The studio was electric. The set was designed to look like a boxing ring for ideas. 2 chairs angled toward each other, a moderator's desk forming the triangle, and a live studio audience of 200 people. The producers had promised a substantive discussion on the future of America, framing it as populism versus the establishment. But as Patel adjusted his cuffs and looked across the stage, it was clear he didn't view this as a debate. He viewed it as an evidentiary hearing. The moderator, Sarah Chen from News Nation, looked at both of them with the wary expression of a substitute teacher who knows she has lost control of the classroom before the bell has even rung. "Welcome to both of you," Chen began, her voice projecting over the low hum of the studio. "We are here tonight for a substantive discussion about—" Before we start, AOC interrupted. She leaned forward, cutting off the moderator with a practiced ease. She knew how to seize the frame. "I just want to say that I think it's interesting that we are even having this debate at all. People like Kash Patel represent everything that is wrong with America right now. They are the bootlickers for billionaires, the defenders of the 1%, the people who would rather protect corporate profits than protect working families." She was 45 seconds into her stump speech. The audience was listening, some nodding, captivated by the rhythm of her rhetoric. It was a good speech. It was emotional. It was rehearsed. And it was about to run into a brick wall. Kash Patel raised his hand. He didn't shout. He didn't interrupt with anger. He raised his hand like a student who had spotted a typo on the blackboard. "Sorry," Patel said. His voice was calm, almost apologetic, which somehow made it more menacing. "Can I just ask a quick question before we get into the prepared attacks?" Sarah Chen blinked, looking between the producers in the dark beyond the lights and the 2 combatants. This wasn't in the format. "I suppose." "Great." Patel turned his chair slightly to face AOC directly. "How did you get here tonight?" AOC blinked. The rhythm of her speech was broken. She looked confused, her brow furrowing. "Excuse me?" To the studio, Patel clarified, his tone helpful. How did you arrive? Did you take an Uber? Did you take the subway? Did you walk? I drove, she said, her tone dripping with annoyance. She shifted in her seat, signaling to the audience that this was a waste of time. Why does that matter? In your Tesla, right? Patel asked. He was already moving. He opened the leather portfolio and pulled out his iPad. He tapped the screen twice. The large monitors behind them, intended for graphics and B-roll footage, flickered and changed. The blue Model 3, Patel said. The one that costs about $47,000. On the screen, a photo appeared. It was grainy, but unmistakable. It showed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepping out of a sleek blue Tesla Model 3 in the parking structure of the studio complex just 20 minutes earlier. Someone on Patel's team had been watching. This is you arriving tonight, Patel said. Nice car, by the way. Really nice. Let's talk about that Tesla. AOC's expression flickered. The first crack in the armor appeared. It's electric, she said defensively, pivoting immediately to the moral high ground. It is better for the environment than a gas vehicle. I am trying to reduce my carbon footprint. It is made by Tesla Inc., Patel continued, ignoring her defense as if she hadn't spoken. CEO, Elon Musk. You know him. You have tweeted about him 47 times in the last 2 years. Yes, I counted. He tapped his iPad again. The screen behind them shifted from the car photo to a mosaic of tweets. It was a wall of text, all from AOC's account. Oligarch, union buster, billionaire playing with humanity's future, space Karen, threat to democracy. You have called him everything in the book, Patel said, looking at the screen and then back at her. Strong words, really strong. You have called him a danger to the Republic. You have called him a villain. But you drive his car every day. Patel leaned back, resting his hands on his lap. The profit from your purchase, let's say Tesla, makes about $5,000 in pure profit per Model 3. That went right into his pocket. You literally wrote a check to the man you claim is destroying democracy. The audience was silent now. The polite applause from earlier had evaporated. They were leaning forward. This wasn't a policy debate. This was an exposure. AOC tried to recover. She straightened her blazer. This is ridiculous. We live in a society where we have to consume goods. It's electric. It aligns with the Green New Deal principles. So does the subway, Patel interrupted gently. The subway, he repeated, which runs 2 blocks from your luxury apartment in Navy Yard. You represent the Bronx and Queens. Your district has some of the best public transit in America. The subway, the bus, the bike lanes. Your party pushed for these. You campaign on public transit. But you drove a $47,000 luxury car to a town hall to fight for working people. Someone in the audience laughed, a short, stifled bark of amusement. This is a distraction, AOC said, turning to the moderator. We are talking about transportation choices when we should be discussing systemic inequality. I think we are discussing hypocrisy, Patel suggested, because I think they are the same thing. He leaned forward, his tone shifting from inquisitor to disappointed colleague. Here is what I don't understand, Congresswoman. You have built your entire brand, your entire political identity, on attacking billionaires, the evil 1%, the oligarchs. You sell merchandise attacking them. You give speeches attacking them, but you make them richer. You bought Elon Musk's car, Patel listed, counting on his fingers. You shop at Amazon. Yes, I have seen the packages delivered to your office. There are photos of the boxes in the hallway. You tweet your attacks on capitalism from an iPhone made by Apple, a company worth over $3 trillion. "You claim to represent the working class," Patel said, his voice hardening. "But you live like the 1% you claim to hate." "My salary is set by Congress," AOC snapped. "I don't control that." "But you keep it," Patel said. "All of it. While advocating for wealth redistribution, while calling for higher taxes on the rich. And by income, Congresswoman, you are the rich." Patel sat back, spreading his hands wide. "Maybe the problem isn't the billionaires, Congresswoman. Maybe the problem is politicians who build careers attacking success while enjoying every single benefit of it. You aren't against capitalism. You are just against other people succeeding at it more than you do." The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a narrative shattering. Sarah Chen cleared her throat, looking desperate to move the segment along, but Patel wasn't done. He had only just opened the portfolio. The air in the studio had changed. It was no longer a platform for platitudes. It was a courtroom. AOC, realizing she was on the back foot, tried to pivot to her greatest hits, the viral moments that had made her a superstar. She needed to regain the moral high ground, and she needed to do it fast. "At least I am not afraid to make statements about inequality," she said, her voice taking on that passionate, tremulous quality that played so well on Instagram Live. "While people like Kash stay silent, while they defend the status quo, while they protect the donor class, I am willing to take risks. I am willing to stand up. I am willing to make people uncomfortable." She looked at the camera, finding her light. "That is what leadership is. It is about disrupting spaces that weren't built for us." She was referring, obviously, to the Met Gala. Her team had likely workshopped this. Turn the controversy into a strength. Own it. Make it about courage. Kash Patel smiled. It was a smile that said, "Oh, honey, you really shouldn't have done that." "Oh, good," Patel said, reaching for his iPad. "I wanted to talk about that." AOC's confidence faltered for a microsecond. She saw his hand move to the screen. "You're talking about the Met Gala, right?" Patel asked. "September 2021, the Tax the Rich dress." "Yes," AOC said, recovering her posture, lifting her chin. "I brought my message to the Lion's Den." To millionaires eating $500 plates of risotto, Patel finished for her. The audience made a sound, not quite laughter, not quite a gasp. It was the sound of recognition. Sarah Chen tried to intervene. "Let's let the Congresswoman finish her thought regarding the—" "No, it's fine," Patel said. "I am genuinely curious. Congresswoman, tell us about the Met Gala. Who was there? What was the message?" He was using a classic cross-examination technique. Give the witness enough rope to hang themselves. AOC took the bait. "The Met Gala was an opportunity to bring my message to a space that is typically exclusive to the wealthy elite," she explained, her hands moving expressively. "It was about forcing a conversation about inequality in a place that celebrates excess. That is why the dress said 'Tax the Rich' in red letters. It was a statement. It was art as activism. It was using the medium of fashion to dismantle the master's house." "How much was your ticket?" Patel asked. AOC stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "Your ticket," Patel said. "To the Met Gala. How much did it cost?" "I was invited," she said carefully. "I didn't pay. It is standard for elected officials of the city to be invited as guests of the museum." "Someone paid," Patel corrected. He tapped his iPad. The screen behind them shifted. It displayed a cached version of the Met Gala's ticketing website from 2021. Individual tickets, $35,000, Patel read. Tables, $270,000. He let the numbers hang in the air like smoke rings. $35,000, he repeated. That is more than half the median household income in your district. For one ticket, to one party, for one night. He tapped the iPad again. Photos appeared. AOC on the red carpet, laughing, posing, the white dress with the red scrawl trailing behind her. She looked beautiful. She looked confident. She looked rich. Let's talk about that night, Patel said. September 13th, 2021. While you were at the Met Gala, sipping champagne, here is what was happening in your district. The screen changed to a graphic of stark, brutal statistics. Average household income in the Bronx, $38,000. Poverty rate, 28%. Food insecurity, 1 in 4 households. Rent burden, 54% of residents spend more than 30% of their income on rent. Your constituents were choosing between rent and food, Patel said, his voice low and intense. They were choosing between insulin and electricity. They were worried about keeping their apartments and fixing their cars. And you were at a $35,000 per plate dinner, wearing a designer dress, telling rich people, the people eating the fancy food, to pay more taxes. It raises awareness, AOC insisted. It put the conversation on the front page. It put you on the front page, Patel countered. And let's talk about the dress, he continued. You claimed it was borrowed to make a statement. The designer was Aurora James, founder of Brother Vellies. He pulled up the website for Brother Vellies. High-end luxury goods. Shoes that cost $500 a pair. Handbags that cost over $1,000. She got millions of dollars in free publicity from that dress, Patel noted. Her business, which sells luxury goods to wealthy clients, saw a massive spike in sales. You gave her the biggest advertising campaign of her career while wearing "Tax the Rich" on your back. He looked at AOC with an expression of profound pity. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife, Congresswoman. You wore a political statement dress that made a luxury goods designer wealthy, to a party for rich people, paid for by donors you won't name, to make a statement about inequality. I was trying to... AOC started. You were trying to go viral, Patel said. And you succeeded. You posted 37 times on Instagram that night, Patel said. I counted those too. 37 carefully curated posts. You posing, you with celebrities, you getting your angles right. The screen showed a montage of her Instagram story from that night. Flashbulbs, selfies, the glamour of the elite. You spent more time taking selfies that night, Patel said quietly, than most of your constituents will spend eating a hot meal this week. AOC looked like she had been slapped. Her face was flushed, her composure cracking. Sarah Chen looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk. That isn't fighting for working people, Congresswoman, Patel said. That isn't activism. That isn't even politics. That is building a personal brand. You aren't a revolutionary. You are an influencer who happens to have a vote in Congress. You preach socialism, Patel said, leaning back. But you practice luxury capitalism. You want the revolution, but you want it catered. And your constituents? They are just the backdrop for your photo op. Sarah Chen, desperate to regain control of the runaway train, looked at her notes. She needed a pivot. She needed something human, something emotional, something that would allow AOC to show her heart instead of her hypocrisy. Let's talk about disaster relief, Chen said. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you have been very vocal about the federal government's response to natural disasters, particularly regarding Puerto Rico. AOC jumped in, grateful for the lifeline. Yes, thank you. This is what I mean about priorities. She leaned into the microphone, her voice trembling with emotion. My own grandmother, my abuela, was living in horrible conditions after Hurricane Maria. The roof was damaged. The ceiling was caving in. She had no help from the government. No help from FEMA. No help from anyone. She looked at the audience, her eyes glistening. This is what happens when we don't invest in infrastructure. When we don't prioritize people over profits. When we abandon our own citizens because they live in a territory instead of a state. My abuela was living in dangerous conditions, and the government failed her. It was a powerful story. It was moving. It was the kind of story that wins elections. Kash Patel waited for her to finish. He waited for the applause to die down. He waited for the sympathy to settle in the room. Then he pulled up his iPad. That is a moving story, Patel said. I remember when you tweeted about it. June 2021, right? Let me pull up those tweets. The screen behind them changed. It showed AOC's Twitter thread from June 1st, 2021. Photos of a dilapidated house in Puerto Rico. Peeling paint. Buckets catching water. Structural damage. These were powerful tweets, Patel admitted. They went viral. Millions of impressions. Thousands of retweets. Very emotional. Very effective at making your political point that the Trump administration failed Puerto Rico. He paused, tapping his iPad. What happened next is even more interesting. AOC's eyes narrowed. She knew where this was going, and she hated it. A conservative commentator, Patel continued, Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, saw your tweets. And you know what he did? He didn't argue with you. He didn't attack you. He didn't write a counter-thread. Patel looked up from his iPad. He started a GoFundMe to actually help your grandmother. The audience was silent now, confused. This didn't fit the narrative of evil conservatives. Not to make a political point, Patel said. To actually fix the problem you had just spent 3 tweets crying about. He set up a GoFundMe with the goal of raising enough money to repair your grandmother's home. He pulled up the GoFundMe page on the screen. Goal, $50,000. Amount raised, $104,000. In 24 hours, Patel said, Conservatives, the people you spend every day attacking, calling fascists and white supremacists, raised $104,000 for your family member to fix the exact problem you tweeted about. AOC tried to interrupt. That was a political stunt. It was performative. It was $104,000 in real money, Patel said, his voice rising for the first time. Genuine anger broke through his prosecutorial calm. To fix a real problem that you had just used for political clout. He took a breath, regaining his composure. And you refused it. Your family refused it, Patel said. Your team issued a statement saying you didn't need right-wing charity. The money was eventually refunded to donors. Your grandmother never got a penny of it. The audience was murmuring now. Whispers of, what? And why? Rippled through the seats. But the story doesn't end there, Patel said, because people got curious. Journalists, actual journalists, not your friends at Teen Vogue, went to Puerto Rico. They checked on the house. He pulled up photos on the screen. Recent photos, dated 2024. The house looked basically the same. This is the house now, Patel said. 3 years later, still damaged, still in poor condition. Your grandmother never got help. Not from the government you claim failed her. Not from the conservatives who tried to help. And apparently, not from you. Patel set down his iPad and looked directly at AOC. You used your own grandmother's suffering as a political prop, he said. You posted her misery on Instagram for engagement. You weaponized her living conditions to attack Republicans. And when people, the evil conservatives you demonize, Offered to actually solve the problem? You refused. Why? Patel asked. Because if the problem got solved, you couldn't tweet about it anymore. AOC's face was red, her hands shaking. You don't know anything about my family. You don't know the dynamics. I know you chose viral tweets over your grandmother's roof, Patel shot back. I know $104,000 in repairs was worth less to you than being able to blame Republicans. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something colder than anger. This is what I don't understand about modern progressives. You don't want to solve problems. You want to campaign on them. You need them to stay broken so you can stay relevant. Your grandmother could have had a fixed roof. Instead, you got retweets. The silence was deafening. How many retweets is your grandmother's suffering worth, Congresswoman? Patel asked. What is the exchange rate? Because apparently, it is more valuable to you than $100,000 in repairs from people you hate. AOC looked like she might cry. Not the practiced tears of her speeches, but the genuine distress of being stripped bare in public. Sarah Chen stared at her notes, praying for a commercial break. But there were no commercials, and Kash Patel was just getting started. Sarah Chen, the moderator, looked at her producer in the shadows of the studio wings. He gave her a frantic, keep going motion. The ratings were likely stratospheric. She smoothed her skirt and pointed to a man in the third row who had been raising his hand aggressively for 10 minutes. You, sir. You have a question? The man stood up. He was in his late 40s, wearing a faded Union windbreaker and a Mets cap he took off out of respect for the camera. He looked like the guys Kash Patel had grown up with, men who worked with their hands and didn't have time for performative politics. Yeah, the man said, his voice thick with a Queen's accent. My name is Mike. I'm from Long Island City. I worked in logistics for 20 years. My question is for the Congresswoman. AOC leaned forward, putting on her listening face, empathetic, engaged, ready to validate. What about the Amazon jobs? Mike asked bluntly. You chased them out. My cousin was going to get a construction contract on that site. Now it's a dirt lot. How is that a win for us? The audience went quiet. This wasn't a plant. This was a constituent. AOC's face lit up. She had been waiting for this. This was her signature victory, the moment she proved she could slay a corporate giant. Thank you for that question, Mike, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. I am so proud that I stood up to corporate greed and won. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, the richest man on earth, wanted $3 billion in tax breaks to bring jobs to Queens. $3 billion. That is money that could have gone to our schools. That is money that could have gone to fixing the subway. That is money for our teachers and firefighters. She gestured widely. We didn't need to bribe a billionaire to come to New York. I helped stop that corporate giveaway, and I would do it again. We do not let corporations hold our communities hostage. There was scattered applause from the progressive wing of the audience, but Mike from Queens didn't clap. He just sat down, looking unconvinced. Kash Patel reached into his leather portfolio. He pulled out a thick document, bound with a clip. Okay, Patel said, his tone cheerful in a way that set off alarm bells for anyone paying attention. Let's talk about Amazon HQ2. Since you're proud of it. He held up the document. This is the actual deal. Not your tweet about the deal. Not the Jacobin article about the deal. The actual memorandum of understanding between Amazon, New York State, and New York City. Have you read it? Patel asked. AOC hesitated. I was briefed extensively by community leaders who have you read. It? Patel repeated, tapping the paper. My staff reviewed the relevant. That's a no, Patel said. You killed the biggest economic development deal in the history of your district without reading the contract. Let me tell you what is in here, Patel continued, flipping to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. Amazon was going to bring 25,000 jobs to Long Island City. The agreement specified an average salary of $150,000 per year. Not minimum wage warehouse jobs, not gig economy driving. $150,000. Patel did the math in the air with his hand. That is $3.75 billion in annual wages flowing directly into your district, every single year. And that's just the direct wages, he added. Economists estimate the multiplier effect for high-tech jobs is about 2.5. That means for every Amazon job, 2.5 other jobs are created. Baristas, dry cleaners, construction workers, drivers. We are talking about $10 billion in annual economic activity. But the tax breaks, AOC interrupted, sensing the room turning. You're ignoring the $3 billion check we were writing to Bezos. Let's talk about the tax breaks, Patel said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming hard as granite. Do you know how tax incentives work, Congresswoman? Of course I do. It's corporate welfare. Explain it, Patel challenged. Explain to Mike from Queens how the $3 billion worked. AOC opened her mouth. She looked at the audience. She looked at Sarah Chen. It was a giveaway from the city coffers. Wrong, Patel said. He didn't shout, but the word landed like a gavel. The $3 billion wasn't a check, Patel explained, turning to the audience like a professor. It wasn't a pile of cash sitting in a vault at City Hall that we decided to give to Amazon instead of a school. That is a lie you have told for 3 years. These were tax credits, Patel said. Performance-based. Amazon would only get them if, and only if, they created the jobs, paid the salaries, and generated the tax revenue first. He held up the document again. It was a discount on future taxes they would owe. If Amazon didn't come, there was no income to tax. Therefore, there was no $3 billion to save. You didn't save $3 billion, Patel said, drilling his eyes into hers. You cost your district $27 billion in tax revenue over 20 years. That is the number in the report, Patel said. The city and state would have netted $27 billion after the incentives. That is money that actually would have fixed the subways. That is money that would have built schools. You burned $27 billion to save $3 billion that didn't exist. That is economic malpractice, Patel said. Mike's cousin lost his contract because you don't understand the difference between a subsidy and a tax credit. He pulled up his iPad again. A video began to play on the studio screens. It was a montage of interviews with small business owners in Long Island City, filmed 6 months after Amazon pulled out. A deli owner, standing in an empty shop. I renovated this place. I was ready for the lunch rush. Now, I'm laying people off. A real estate broker. Property values tanked. The neighborhood is dead. These are your constituents, Patel said, as the video played. This is what your victory feels like to them. And here is the ultimate irony, Patel said, closing the iPad case with a snap. Where did Amazon go instead? AOC stared straight ahead, her jaw set. Virginia, Patel answered. Crystal City. They took the deal. They got the 25,000 jobs. They got the tax revenue. They got the infrastructure improvements. Their schools are getting funded by the taxes Amazon employees pay. Virginia got the win. New York got nothing. And you got to feel righteous on Twitter. He turned to the audience. Is anyone else here from Queens? A dozen hands went up. Ask yourselves, Patel said to them, Would you rather have 25,000 six-figure jobs in your neighborhood and a tax discount for Amazon, or an empty lot and a famous congresswoman? AOC sat frozen. For the first time in her career, the corporate greed talking point hadn't worked. The math had crushed the narrative. She had killed the golden goose and bragged about saving the birdseed. Sarah Chen checked her earpiece. The producers were screaming that this was the best television they had ever produced. "Keep going," the voice said. "Don't let up." Chen turned to AOC. "Congresswoman, let's pivot to your economic philosophy. You advocate for significant wealth redistribution." "Yes," AOC said, jumping on the lifeline. "We need a system where the wealthy pay their fair share. We need a 70% marginal tax rate on incomes over $10 million. We need to break up the concentration of capital that is suffocating the working class." Kash Patel leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "Interesting," he said. "Let's talk about your wealth." AOC's eyes darted to him. "I am not wealthy. I have student loans. I am a working-class person who got elected." "How much do you make?" Patel asked. "That's public record," she snapped. $174,000 a year. "And that puts you in what percentile of American earners?" She hesitated. "I don't know the exact—" "Top 10%, Patel supplied. "You earn more than 90% of the people in this country. By your own definition, Congresswoman, you are the rich." He picked up a piece of paper from his portfolio. "Now, you want to raise taxes. You want the government to take more money from high earners to fund social programs. Here is my question," Patel said. "Do you pay more than you owe?" "I pay my taxes," she said defensively. "That's not what I asked," Patel said. "The U.S. Treasury has a website, pay.gov. You can make voluntary contributions to reduce the national debt. You can give as much of your salary back to the government as you want. Have you ever written a check to the U.S. Treasury for a single dollar more than the IRS required?" Silence. "That's a no," Patel said. "So let me get this straight," he continued. "You believe the government can spend money better than individuals. You believe high taxes are a moral good. But when it comes to your money, you keep every cent you are legally allowed to keep." "You want forced charity," Patel said. "You don't practice voluntary charity." "Individual actions don't change systemic issues," she argued. "Me giving $5,000 doesn't fix health care." "It shows leadership," Patel countered. "It shows you believe in your own product." He tapped his iPad. "Let's look at how you live on that top 10% salary." Documents appeared on the screen. Rental listings. When you ran for Congress, you lived in the Bronx. Very modest. But within months of winning, you moved to Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. Navy Yard, Patel explained to the audience, is one of the most gentrified, expensive neighborhoods in the capital. You moved into a luxury building. Photos of the building appeared: a rooftop infinity pool, a fitness center with Peloton bikes, a concierge desk, and yes, a pet spa. Rent, approx $3,000 a month, Patel read. That is $36,000 a year just on housing. That is more than the total annual income of a minimum wage worker. "I have to live in D.C. for my job," she protested. "It's an expensive city." "There are affordable apartments in D.C., Patel said. "There are basement units. There are roommates. There are neighborhoods that aren't built for lobbyists and tech executives. But you chose the luxury building with the rooftop pool. You chose to live like the elite you claim to hate." He scrolled to the next image. It was a screenshot of her campaign finance filings. "And let's talk about money and politics," Patel said. "You say you don't take corporate PAC money. That is your badge of honor." "I am funded by the people," she said proudly. Small dollar donations. Let's look at that, Patel said. Your last filing showed $5.2 million raised. You accept donations through Act Blue? Do you know who donates to Act Blue? Tech millionaires? Hollywood executives? Trust fund activists. You have received contributions from employees of Google, Apple, Amazon, and Netflix. You take money from the very corporations you attack. You just take it from their executives individually, so you can claim it's grassroots. It's a shell game, Patel said. It's the same money, same influence, just washed through a different filter. He leaned forward, his voice filled with genuine frustration. Here is what kills me, Congresswoman. You want to redistribute wealth, just not your wealth. You want others to pay their fair share, but you take every deduction. You want to tax the rich, but you enjoy being rich. You aren't a democratic socialist, Patel said. You are a democratic socialist who loves capitalism for herself. That isn't hypocrisy. That is fraud. You are selling a product, socialism, that you refuse to use yourself. He spread his hands. If the government is so good at spending money, why don't you give them yours? Why do you need a Tesla and a luxury apartment and designer clothes? Why not live on the median income of your district, $52,000, and donate the rest? That would be leadership. That would be walking the walk. But you won't do that, Patel said quietly. Because you like the rooftop pool too much? The audience was restless now. The energy in the room was a mix of shock and awe. Patel was methodically dismantling the AOC mythology piece by piece. First the environmentalism, then the working-class hero persona, now the economic philosophy. Sarah Chen looked at the clock. We have time for one major policy discussion. Congresswoman, your signature legislation is the Green New Deal. AOC sat up straighter. This was her Bible. This was the hill she was willing to die on. Yes, she said. The Green New Deal is about saving our planet. It is about recognizing that climate change is an existential crisis. We have 12 years to act. We cannot wait. We cannot compromise. How much does it cost? Patel asked. He didn't wait for her to finish the speech. He cut right to the bottom line. AOC faltered. What? Your plan, Patel said. The Green New Deal. How much does it cost to implement? It's not about cost, she deflected. It's about investment. The cost of inaction is infinite. Everything has a cost, Patel said. You wrote the bill. You introduced it. How much? We can afford it if we prioritize. How? Much? She looked at Sarah Chen, who offered no help. The estimates vary, she said finally. It depends on implementation. $93 trillion, Patel said. He held up a document. The American Action Forum estimates the cost at $93 trillion over 10 years. Even the lowest estimates, the most optimistic ones, put it at $51 trillion. Let's use the middle, Patel said. Let's be generous. Let's say it's $70 trillion. The current federal budget is about $6 trillion a year. Your plan would more than double the entire federal budget every single year for a decade. How do you pay for that? We can be creative, AOC said. We can close tax loopholes. We can tax the rich. Let's do the math, Patel said. He was enjoying this. The total wealth, not income, wealth, of every billionaire in America is about $4.5 trillion. If you confiscated every penny they have, Patel said, if you took Bezos's stock, Musk's factories, Gates's land, if you took it all and left them with zero, you would get $4.5 trillion. Your plan costs $93 trillion. You would run out of billionaires to rob in the first 6 months, Patel said. Then, who do you tax? The middle class, he answered for her. You would have to tax every American worker at 70% to even come close. AOC tried to pivot. Modern monetary theory suggests that sovereign nations who control their currency can— "Oh, we are doing MMT now?" Patel laughed. It was a harsh sound. "The magic money tree theory? The idea that we can just print money forever without inflation?" He pulled up his iPad. Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner, liberal economist, New York Times columnist, called MMT Calvin Ball. He said it's made-up rules. Larry Summers, Clinton's Treasury Secretary, called it voodoo economics. "Even liberal economists think your funding plan is nonsense," Patel said. "But let's talk about what the Green New Deal actually does," Patel continued. "Because it's not just about money. It's about control." He counted on his fingers. 1. Eliminate all fossil fuels in 10 years. That destroys 10 million jobs in oil and gas. 2. Eliminate air travel where rail is feasible. Do you know how long it takes to build high-speed rail? We haven't finished a single line in California in 15 years. 3. Retrofit every building in America, every home, every office, by government mandate. 4. Guaranteed government jobs for everyone, even those unwilling to work. That was in your FAQ, Congresswoman. "That isn't an environmental plan," Patel said. "That is a government takeover of the entire U.S. economy." He pulled up a quote on the screen behind them. "This is your former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, in 2019. The quote read, "The interesting thing about the Green New Deal is it wasn't originally a climate thing at all. We really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing." Patel looked at AOC. He admitted it. "It's not about the climate. It's about using climate fear to implement socialism." "It is a Trojan horse," Patel said. "You wrap it in green, but inside it's red. You wrote a bill that would bankrupt America, destroy millions of jobs, and give the government control over what we drive, how we live, and what we eat. And when asked how to pay for it, your answer is, we'll be creative." "That is not policy," Patel said, closing his folder. "That is fantasy. It is economic illiteracy wrapped in environmental virtue signaling." He looked directly at the camera. "This is what happens when someone who bartended for 4 years thinks they can redesign a $25 trillion economy." "No offense to bartenders," Patel added. "I've washed dishes. I respect honest work. But knowing how to mix a margarita doesn't qualify you to restructure global capitalism." The audience erupted. It was chaos. Some booed, some cheered, but everyone was reacting. The spell of AOC's competence had been broken. The numbers had exposed the emptiness of the slogans. Sarah Chen looked at the clock. They were over time, but the producers weren't stopping. This was the moment. "We have time for one final question from the audience," Chen announced. A woman in the back stood up. She was dressed in professional attire, sharp and serious. She looked like a teacher or a lawyer. "My question is for Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez," she said. Her voice was steady. "You speak a lot about change and revolution, but my question is simple. What is your actual legislative accomplishment?" The room went dead silent. This was the question every critic wanted to ask. AOC straightened in her chair. She had a list ready. "I have introduced 33 bills addressing climate change, health care, and workers' rights. I have co-sponsored hundreds more. I have moved the Overton window on environmental policy." "Bills introduced isn't accomplishments," Patel interrupted. "How many passed?" he asked. AOC faltered. "The legislative process is slow. It takes time to build coalitions." "How many of your bills have become law?" Patel pressed. The bills you wrote. The bills with your name on them. 0, Patel answered. He held up a finger. 0. You have been in Congress for 3 years. You have introduced 33 bills. 0 have passed the House. 0 have passed the Senate. 0 have been signed by the President. Your legislative batting average is 0.000. He pulled up the congressional record on his iPad. According to the Center for Effective Lawmaking, you were ranked as one of the least effective members of the entire Congress. But let's talk about what you have accomplished, Patel said. He tapped the screen. Twitter followers, 13 million. Instagram followers, 8.5 million. TikTok, 6 million. You are one of the most followed politicians in the world, Patel said. Very impressive. He set down the iPad. You aren't a legislator, Congresswoman. You are an influencer with a congressional salary. The audience made a collective sound, a mixture of shock and recognition. The label stuck immediately. AOC tried to fight back. I am building a movement. Legislation follows public pressure. No, Patel said firmly. You are building a brand. Your brand. Not a movement, not legislation, not solutions, a personal brand. He pulled up her website on the screen. AOC merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, phone cases, all sold through your website. Tax the rich sweatshirts for $58. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so cynical, Patel said. You are literally profiting from your office. You have monetized your congressional position like it's an Instagram sponsorship. You have turned Congress into content creation, Patel accused. Every committee hearing is a clip for TikTok. Every floor speech is a fundraising email. Every controversy is engagement metrics. He stood up. For the first time in the debate, he stood. Let's summarize what we have established tonight, he said. You attack billionaires while enriching them with your purchases. You attended a $35,000 gala in a dress made by a luxury designer. You exploited your own grandmother's suffering for political points and refused help for her. You killed 25,000 jobs in your own district because you didn't understand tax credits. You advocate socialism while living in luxury capitalism. You proposed legislation that would cost $93 trillion with no plan to pay for it. And in 3 years in Congress, you have passed 0 laws. He walked toward her chair. So here is my question, Congresswoman. What are you actually doing? AOC opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You aren't legislating, Patel said. You aren't solving problems. You aren't helping your constituents. You are tweeting. You are trending. You are going viral. He spread his hands. You aren't a member of Congress. You are a social media influencer who happens to have a vote. And your constituents deserve better. The silence in the studio following the 0 laws revelation was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually accompanies a natural disaster or a knockout punch in the final round of a heavyweight fight. The audience wasn't just quiet. They were stunned. The spell of inevitability that had surrounded Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for 3 years, the idea that she was the unstoppable future of the Democratic Party, had been broken by a simple spreadsheet. Kash Patel didn't sit back down. He remained standing, dominating the space. He wasn't aggressive, but he was imposing. He looked less like a debater now and more like a judge delivering a sentence. So here is the choice, Patel said, turning his body to address the cameras directly. He broke the fourth wall, speaking not to AOC, but to the millions of people watching on screens across the country. America has a choice to make. We are at a crossroads. Do we want leaders who solve problems, or influencers who post about them? He gestured to the empty air where AOC's legislative record should have been. Do we want politicians who understand economics, who know that you can't spend money you don't have, and that tax incentives aren't cash giveaways? Or do we want activists who understand engagement algorithms? Do we want representatives who pass laws? Or do we want celebrities who pass judgment? He turned back to AOC. She was small in her chair now. The fire that usually animated her, the righteous indignation, the snapping fingers, the wide eyes, was gone. She looked exhausted. She looked exposed. You aren't the future of the Democratic Party, Congresswoman, Patel said softly. You are a warning. You are a warning about what happens when we elect people based on viral moments instead of actual qualifications. You are a warning about what happens when we prioritize Twitter followers over legislative competence, when we mistake performance for governance. He walked back to his chair and began to pack up his things. He closed the leather portfolio. He snapped the cover onto his iPad. The movements were final. Your constituents elected you to represent them in Congress, Patel said. To sit in committee hearings, to write bills, to build coalitions, to pass legislation, to improve their lives. You have given them Instagram posts and zero laws. Is that the representation they deserve? AOC tried to respond. She reached for the microphone, her hand trembling slightly. She fell back on the only defense she had left, the victim card. You are attacking me because you are afraid of the movement we are building, she said, her voice shaking. You are afraid because a woman of color from the Bronx is shaking up the establishment, and you can't handle it. Patel stopped packing. He looked at her one last time. I'm not afraid of you, Patel said quietly. I am disappointed for your constituents. They deserve better than an Instagram account with a vote. The studio erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was chaos. Half the room was cheering, standing on their feet. The other half was booing, shouting, "Shame!" But the noise didn't matter. The visual was what mattered. Patel sat calmly, his point made, sipping his water. AOC sat in her chair, looking at her phone, desperate to escape the frame. Sarah Chen, realizing she had completely lost control of the broadcast, tried to shout over the din. Thank you. That is all the time we have. Thank you to our candidates. Good night. The lights dimmed, but the cameras kept rolling for the credits. They captured Patel standing up and extending a hand to AOC. It was a gesture of professional courtesy. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. And then she turned her back and walked off the stage without a word. It was the final mistake of the night. It confirmed everything Patel had just said. She wasn't a leader who could handle opposition. She was a content creator who had just lost control of the narrative. The video hit social media at 9:47 p.m. Eastern Time. It didn't start with the mainstream media. It started on X, formerly Twitter. A user ripped the Zero Laws segment and posted it with the caption, "Holy ST, Kash Patel just ended her." By 10 p.m., the hashtag for Zero Laws was trending #1 in the United States. By 11 p.m., clips were exploding on the very platforms AOC had once dominated: TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. The algorithm, which usually favored her, turned on her. The clip was too compelling. It was too brutal. The Tesla reveal, the Met Gala ticket price, the Abuela GoFundMe refusal, the Amazon math, the legislative scoreboard. By midnight, conservative media was playing it on a loop. Fox News, Newsmax, The Daily Wire. Every right-leaning outlet had it as their top story. Laura Ingraham opened her show with a monologue titled "The Emperor Has No Clothes," But by 6 a.m. the next morning, even the mainstream media couldn't ignore it. CNN covered it with the headline, "Heated Town Hall Exchange Raises Questions About Progressive Record." MSNBC tried. Context needed. Fact-checking claims about AOC's legislative history. But the video didn't need context. Patel had brought the receipts. He had shown the documents on screen. The audience could see the math. Within 48 hours, the debate had been viewed 68 million times across all platforms. The phrase "Instagram account with a vote" became an instant meme. Merchandise appeared within days. Conservatives were wearing shirts with the phrase. Progressives tried to reclaim it ironically, but it failed. It was too accurate. It stung too much. People started applying the Trichy Zero Laws test to other politicians. This senator has been in office for 12 years. Zero laws. This governor talks a good game. Zero laws. It became shorthand for performative politics without substance. AOC's response was telling. She posted a defensive Twitter thread at 11:30 p.m. the night of the debate. Tonight's ambush was everything wrong with corporate media. Cherry-picked facts out of context, designed to attack a woman of color standing up for working people. This is what they do when they are scared of our movement. But the problem was simple. Patel hadn't cherry-picked. He had used her own tweets, her own words, public records, verifiable facts. You couldn't claim out of context when the full video was everywhere. Her squad tried to defend her. Representative Ilhan Omar tweeted support. Representative Rashida Tlaib called it a right-wing hit job. Representative Ayanna Pressley wrote about coordinated attacks on women of color in Congress. But the response felt weak. It felt defensive. It felt scripted. Even some progressive commentators quietly admitted that AOC had been unprepared, that maybe she should have had better answers about the Amazon deal, that perhaps relying on viral moments instead of substantive policy was finally catching up to her. A prominent liberal columnist wrote a piece for The Atlantic titled, "The Danger of Celebrity Politics." It didn't mention Patel by name, but it was a devastating critique of the AOC model of governance. The narrative had shifted. The armor was pierced. The queen of social media had been dethroned on her own turf. The political fallout was immediate and severe. Within a week, 3 different Democrats announced they were considering primary challenges in her district for the next cycle. 2 were moderates who had been waiting for her to show weakness. Labor-aligned Democrats who remembered the Amazon jobs. 1 was a progressive who thought she had become too focused on celebrity instead of constituents. Polling in her district showed her approval rating dropping 18 points in 10 days. Her disapproval rating among independents jumped to 61%. Even among Democrats, she had lost ground, down to 68% approval from a high of 82%. Democratic leadership, which had always been wary of AOC and the squad, now openly distanced themselves. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, when asked about the debate, gave a carefully worded statement. "Every member of our caucus brings different strengths. We encourage all our members to focus on substantive policy that helps working families." Translation: You are on your own, kid. AOC lost her position on a key subcommittee, ostensibly due to reorganization, but everyone in Washington knew it was punishment for making the party look bad. She stopped doing live television appearances. No more CNN, no more MSNBC. Even the friendly outlets were too risky, now that the zero laws question was out there. She retreated to her safe spaces: Instagram Live, TikTok, podcasts with hosts who wouldn't challenge her record. Meanwhile, Kash Patel became an overnight conservative folk hero. His Twitter following went from 500,000 to 4.3 million in a week. Conservative organizations started recruiting him for more debates, more town halls, more appearances. Republican campaigns across the country started using clips from the debate in their ads. This is what happens when you elect Instagram influencers instead of leaders. Vote for experience. Vote Republican. His approach, calm, factual, relentless documentation, became a template. Bring receipts became the new rallying cry on the right. Other Republican officials started adopting his style. Prepare thoroughly. Cite specific facts. Don't get emotional. Let the evidence speak. The media narrative had fundamentally shifted. For years, AOC had been portrayed as a rising star, the inevitable future of the Democratic Party, a force to be reckoned with. Now, articles started appearing with headlines like, "The Limits of Twitter Politics," "When Viral Moments Aren't Enough," "Can Instagram Activism Translate to Legislative Success?" Even Saturday Night Live did a sketch portraying the debate. They had the AOC character constantly trying to pivot to talking points, while the Patel character kept pulling out increasingly absurd props and documents. It was surprisingly even-handed, which was, in itself, telling. The cultural protection she had enjoyed was gone. The cultural impact went beyond politics. Zero laws became a cultural idiom. It was used in business to describe employees who talked a big game but delivered no results. It was used in sports to describe players with big contracts and no championships. College campuses, where AOC had been a hero, started questioning her effectiveness. Student groups debated whether it was better to have representatives who passed legislation or representatives who raised awareness. The conversations got heated. 3 weeks after the debate, AOC announced she wouldn't seek re-election to House leadership positions. She stated she would focus on serving my constituents directly rather than leadership roles. In Washington speak, that meant, "I have been sidelined, and I am trying to save face." Her media presence, once ubiquitous, diminished. She still tweeted. She still posted. But the engagement was lower. The viral moments were less frequent. The influence was waning. The debate had exposed something fundamental. You could build a brand on social media. You could become famous. You could sell sweatshirts. But you couldn't hide legislative failure forever. Eventually, someone would ask, "What have you actually accomplished?" And if the answer was 0 laws, all the Instagram followers in the world wouldn't save you. Kash Patel had brought receipts. And receipts, it turned out, were more powerful than retweets.